Uh, every single innovator that I've talked to is manufacturing in the U.S. that I know of, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think it's really important too.
And so, how is that happening? Because shit, it seemed like 4 years ago nobody would talk about that. It was all going to China.
Right. Well, maybe it makes sense to start with how we lost it. And I heard a story recently that was eye-opening for me. We were out shopping for jet engine parts. We're making our own jet engine. It turns out it's really important to do it that way. And so we're shopping for turbine blades, and we're meeting with some of the high-tech manufacturers of turbine blades. And I said, well, how long does it take to get one if I gave you the design today? And they said 18 months. 18. Why does it take 18 months?
That's crazy.
Well, 9 of that is just to do the tools, the high precision industrial molds. Well, does it take 9 months to make a mold? Like, what is somebody doing for 9 months? Well, actually, no. Most of that time is you're waiting for your turn with the tool guy.
They don't have enough.
Why is that? Well, we only have a couple of tool guys left in the country that know how to do that.
That's what's happening. There's not enough people, skilled people to manufacture in the United States. There's no skills. There's no tools and perhaps like applications because it's all gone.
Okay, how'd that happen? And then the guys across the table smiled and said, we got a story for you. Started with Chinese pirating of Western CAD software. And this is the high-end software that you use to design stuff on a computer. And of course, there's no respect for intellectual property in China. And so they'd rip off the software. And this software is, don't think this is like $100 like copy of Windows. This is tens of thousands of dollars per engineer for this high-end custom software. You need to do these things. And so if you take out 10,000, multiple tens of thousands of dollars per engineer in cost, forget that there's a labor cost discrepancy. Just that alone means it's going to be cheaper to do the work in China than it is in the US. Because we pay for the software here. They don't pay for it there. Okay, now anybody who wants to save some money is going to ship their tool work to China.
That's crazy.
And if your competitor ships their tool work to China and you don't ship your tool work to China, now you start losing contracts because you're not commercially competitive. And so it sort of starts this giant like sucking of talent out of tool and die design into China.
That's crazy that story it actually makes sense. Like people overseas would take the software from here, and then it's all brought to another country where they're learning this massively for the fraction of the price, and we eventually became slower at learning this stuff where other countries excelled tremendously. And over the years, they perfected a craft that we could have done and just pushed it out over there.
And that that only accelerates with labor cost differences, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, I don't know why, but we told ourselves in America that manufacturing isn't important or isn't sexy, and it was like somehow okay to be we don't make things. And the most plausible way I can think of this is imagine China wasn't communist. Imagine China was just like another state. Okay, would it matter if would it matter if in the U.S. all the manufacturing moved to California, and in Tennessee we do software? That would be just fine.
Yeah.
Law of comparative advantage. Some of that stuff should happen. The problem is, and I think there was a period of time where this was less obvious. Of course, it's way more obvious now. Is that China's not a free country, and fundamentally, I think that not free countries are a threat to free countries. And so it became very dangerous that that stuff left.
Interesting.
And then we've done, so there's that whole side of it. And then America, we've done as much. I think we've probably done more damage to ourselves than China did to us.
How so?
We made it really difficult to build here. So, the speed limit we talked about before is probably one of the biggest examples of that. That's the biggest regulatory own goal in history. We banned innovation in airplanes, and then 50 years later, we're surprised we can't competently make them anymore. Like, that shouldn't surprise anyone.
And that's exactly what's happening with the drone technology in the United States. We are over-regulating the drone technology, and we're not innovating. That's why everything's coming from China.
Anybody?
Well, that's the other thing that every single innovator I've brought in here says is the biggest hurdle they have to deal with is the bureaucracy with the government.
It is.
In one way or another.
That's right. I mean, there is a way to. So we have found great ways to work with FAA. Like, we never had a regulatory delay on XB1, and we made it teamwork. We found a way to work in the system. We made friends with the people there. There are a lot of good people at FAA. But fundamentally, a whole lot of the system we have is really broken. So I'll give you another story. So we built a factory in North Carolina, 180,000 square foot factory, first supersonic airliner factory in America. It took longer to get the building permit than it took to build the factory. It took 18 months to get the building permit. Okay, well, why? Well, we had to get a environmental approval on the noise that would be made by the airplane after we manufactured it.
Wait, say that again?
It doesn't make any sense. We had to get approval for how much noise our airplanes were going to make after they were built in order to build the factory.
How can that be? You don't even have the planes yet.
This makes no sense. And
where does this shit even come from?
Oh,
like, is that like a written law?
It is so there's something called NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. That was, I think, probably one of the worst laws ever. And it requires environmental, studies, pre-approval of anything that has federal jurisdiction. Our factory was on an airport, so there was federal jurisdiction. So the FAA administered it, and the FAA had a rule that basically said, well, we don't want you to be able to build anything and later on be able to increase your footprint. So anything you might ultimately do in a facility has to be approved on the day you build the facility. There is, you just pull on that thread, and all of a sudden we're doing noise studies on an airplane we haven't designed yet, let alone built yet, where our pledge has been it's not going to be any louder.
Wow.
So it
paperless parts will.
And our pledge has been it's not going to be any louder.
Wow.
So
all this regulation will slow everything down.
And I tell my business friends about this, and I'm complaining about this 18-month process, and some of them are saying, "Are you kidding, dude? That's good. You had only 18 months? Like, mine was years or decades."
That's crazy. What are we doing, man?
And I think the whole way we do permitting and the whole way we do regulation's broken.
Do you see that changing?
Or it's just too outdated and old. That could be the other thing. It's very old and outdated, and even that part, the regulation area sector hasn't innovated itself.
I mean, this is just it just makes me wonder how many more innovators are out there and how much farther ahead we would be or could be, if these regulations weren't there. I mean, it's throwing our country behind.
It is.
Just about every.
I hope that more people talk about it, because there's also a dynamic where, if you're regulated by some entity, you need to cooperate with that entity in order to actually get stuff done. And then all the pressure is, well, definitely don't say anything bad, because maybe that would sour a relationship. Maybe that, like my policy people always say, can't say anything bad about the entities that have jurisdiction over us. But I think we just need to talk about it.
No, but it's just slowing down innovation. That's the problem. They can have regulations, but it's just it's slowing everything down.
I think the system is fundamentally mistaken. I mean, so to move forward with anything as humans, we have to take some risk. So we have to decide what are good risks and what are bad risks. And the way we have set the system up today is we have monopolized centrally risk decisions. So everybody wants clean air and clean water and food that's safe and drugs that work and airplanes that don't crash, right? Like, obviously. And okay, but we have to take some risks. So who gets to decide? Well, if it's related to environment, there's a monopoly called EPA that has that decision. If it's related to airplanes, there's a monopoly called FAA that has that decision. If we're talking food or drugs, there's a monopoly called the FDA that has that jurisdiction. And if they ever approve anything that doesn't work, they're in big trouble. And by the way, it happens. Yeah, FAA approved the 737 Max. FDA famously approved thalidomide. And so if when they let one thing through that maybe wasn't so good, now they're in real trouble. If they hold up something that is good, kind of nobody notices. And so it creates this like asymmetric bias towards conservatism. And this is not anything about anybody at any of these agencies. There are many great people at these agencies trying to do good work. But fundamentally, the incentives are all tilted. And we've monopolized risk decisions. And so that and put that aside at one point. The other point is that in many cases we have to ask for permission before we can go do things. Like, imagine we drive to work the way we build factories or airplanes. Well, we have to get permission every day and show our plan and okay, on this stretch of road, what speed are you going to drive? Okay, it's under the speed limit. All right, you can go. Versus what we actually do is go drive, and if you break the rules, we enforce the rules. And so the whole notion of permitting.
By the way, the airline industry, that's what they do. They have to create plans before they fly and all that stuff. They have to send out authorization in order to fly, which is more like a safety thing, and it's more like a logging. It's a logging section of the protocols, but yeah, it would be crazy if every time you stepped into a car you would have to do that. Like, I am going to the supermarket, so I have to send in the log.
I think needs to be rethought.
It's a good point. It's a damn good point. When you so do you see this? How fast do you see this changing throughout this administration? Because it seems like everybody that I talk to they seem really positive.
Yeah, I am. It's gone much better than I thought it would. Right after the election, I forced myself to sit down. Everyone was spouting opinions, right? And some people are just going to be glorious. Some people say, we're headed into dictatorship. And I thought, okay, I'm going to force myself to write down what I really think. I'm going to make 4 predictions, and then I'm going to put them down, put a date on them, and I'll come back and I'll see what I was right about, what I was wrong about, and I'll try to learn from where I was wrong. And I got going. I ended up writing about 40 predictions. I was like, well, I'll write enough. I'm guaranteed some of these are wrong. And then I'll get to learn about it. And, and one thing I wrote down was there will be deregulation, but it won't be that significant. Boy, I was wrong. Now, are we doing everything that I wish we would do? Probably not. But heck, we repealed the supersonic flight ban. And if you look at what's
115 days,
115 days, right? And that's not even the most significant thing. I mean, it's most significant for supersonic flight and for me. But if you look at what's happening out of energy, it's even more exciting.
Yeah.
Chris Wright, who I think is just one of the most amazing leaders we have in DC now, our energy secretary, worked with the president to get an executive order that basically zero baselines regulation. And so if you don't renew a regulation, it automatically goes away.
Nice.
Right? And we haven't even started to see that play out. It takes, these things take a little while to be implemented. And then once they get implemented, industry has to respond. And then the building has to actually happen. So it takes a little while. But I think there is I don't know if it's a year or 3 years, there is a big boom of a good kind about to happen from a lot of that unleashing that has just barely started.
What do you think that looks like by the end of this term?
I don't know if I'm smart enough to predict timescales. It's much easier to predict the distant future than it is to predict the near future. I'll tell you what my hope is. My hope is there's enough actual positive results that people can understand it, get behind it, and not reverse it. But time's of the essence. And I think that's one of my other hopes is that this pattern of I do one term, then I go away, and I come back and I do another term. I know that wasn't the plan.
Mm-hmm.
It might actually be a really good idea, because in the time away, Trump got to rebuild his team. He got to reflect on everything he learned in his first term, what worked, what hadn't worked. Got to plan, and then they hit the ground running, because 4 years is going to go by like that.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of entrenched resistance to change in Washington. And so the more you can just have good muzzle velocity right out of the gate, the more they can get done in 4 years.